You check your portfolio again. The numbers haven't changed since this morning, but something inside you needs the reassurance. Not reassurance that the market is moving in your favor. Reassurance that someone, somewhere, knows what they're doing. That there's a strategy you haven't found yet, a signal you haven't read, a guru whose newsletter will finally make sense of all this uncertainty. You tell yourself you're doing research, but what you're really doing is looking for permission. Permission to trust yourself. Permission to stop waiting. Warren Buffett has never sent that permission slip. He won't. And that refusal, that stark absence of rescue, is the entire point. The modern financial landscape promises you everything except autonomy. Every notification is designed to make you feel behind. Every market swing is framed as a crisis only an expert can navigate. Every advertisement whispers that you're one subscription, one course, one insider tip away from finally understanding what the smart people already know. The message is consistent and relentless. You are not enough. You cannot do this alone. Someone is coming to save you. You just need to find them. This is not financial advice. This is emotional architecture. And it maps directly onto patterns formed long before you ever opened a brokerage account. Attachment theory identifies a fundamental human need for security through connection. As children, we learn whether the world is safe based on whether our needs are met consistently, predictably, and without condition. When that early environment is unstable, when care is inconsistent or conditional, the nervous system adapts. It creates strategies, and one of the most common strategies is hypervigilance toward external authority. You learn to scan the room for the person who knows, the person who will tell you what to do, the person whose approval means you're safe. This is not weakness. This is survival intelligence that worked once and has never been updated. When you enter the financial world carrying this unexamined pattern, the behavior looks identical to prudent research. You watch videos, you read articles, you follow traders, you join communities. But underneath the appearance of education is something else. You are waiting for someone to tell you that you've done enough, that you know enough, that you're ready. And because no external voice can ever fill an internal void, you never stop waiting. Buffett's philosophy is unbearable for this pattern because it offers no rescue. He tells you to buy what you understand and hold it. He tells you the market is not a roulette table. He tells you that the best investment you can make is in yourself. He tells you to ignore the noise, and then he stops talking. He goes back to reading annual reports in Omaha. He is not coming to save you. He is showing you that no one is coming to save you, and that this is not a tragedy. It is a requirement. The persona, in Jungian terms, is the mask you show the world. It is the version of yourself you believe will be accepted, valued, and kept safe. For many people navigating financial markets, the persona is the eager student, the person who asks good questions, the person who takes notes, the person who is always one step away from getting it right. This persona is socially rewarded. People praise you for being humble, for seeking guidance, for not being arrogant. But the persona also protects the shadow. The shadow holds what you cannot consciously accept about yourself. In this case, the shadow holds your terror of being alone with your own judgment. It holds the belief that if you stop learning and start acting, you will be exposed as incompetent, that you will make the wrong choice, that you will lose everything, that the world will see you as you secretly fear you are, uninformed, reckless, and fundamentally incapable. The student persona allows you to remain in motion without ever arriving. It lets you stay engaged without ever being accountable, and it keeps the shadow hidden, even from you. Buffett's approach does not allow for this split. He does not separate learning from doing. He does not valorize perpetual preparation. He treats knowledge as something you acquire through decision-making, not as a prerequisite for decision-making. He built his fortune by making choices with imperfect information, observing the results, and refining his understanding over decades, not by waiting until he felt ready, not by outsourcing his conviction to someone else. He integrated the student and the actor into a single continuous process. And that integration is terrifying if your identity depends on keeping them separate. Therapists consistently observe that people who struggle to take financial responsibility often describe a feeling of fraudulence. Even when they have spent years studying markets, reading books, and consuming content, they report feeling like they are pretending, like everyone else has access to a clarity they lack. This is not a cognitive deficit. This is an emotional block rooted in early relational learning. If you were taught that your value depends on external validation, you will experience independent action as dangerous. Your nervous system will interpret self-reliance as abandonment, and you will unconsciously recreate conditions that keep you dependent, even when you consciously desire freedom. This is why you can know Buffett's principles intellectually and still not apply them. The gap is not informational. The gap is emotional. You are not missing a strategy. You are afraid of what it will mean about you if you stop looking for one. The existentialists understood that freedom is not a gift, it is a burden. Sartre wrote that we are condemned to be free, that every moment we are not making a choice, we are making the choice not to choose, and that this evasion of responsibility is itself a choice for which we are accountable. In financial terms, this means that remaining passive, staying in cash, endlessly researching, waiting for certainty, these are not neutral states. They are active decisions with consequences. And those consequences include the loss of compound growth, the erosion of purchasing power, and the forfeiture of decades that cannot be recovered. But more than that, they include the loss of selfhood, because every time you defer to someone else's judgment, you weaken your own. Every time you wait for permission, you teach yourself that you are not the author of your life. You become a spectator to your own existence. And this is not a financial problem. This is an existential one. Buffett's wealth is often framed as the result of brilliant stock picks, and he has made brilliant stock picks. But the deeper pattern is relentless self-trust over decades. He has been publicly wrong. He has missed opportunities. He has held positions that underperformed for years. And he did not interpret those outcomes as proof that he needed someone else to think for him. He interpreted them as data. He adjusted. He continued. He never outsourced his conviction, and that continuity of self-authorship is what compounded. You cannot replicate his returns by copying his positions. The positions are symptoms of a psychological structure, and the structure is built on a foundation most people never examine. The foundation is this: I am responsible for my life. No one is coming. And that is not a crisis. That is clarity. Clinical psychology recognizes that emotional regulation, the ability to tolerate discomfort without collapsing into avoidance or reactivity, is learned through repeated exposure to manageable stress in the presence of stable support. If you did not receive that in childhood, you likely developed compensatory strategies. And one of the most common is the externalization of authority. You place the responsibility for your emotional safety onto someone else, a parent, a partner, a guru, a system. And as long as that external structure is in place, you feel stable. But the moment it is absent or unreliable, you fragment. This is why market volatility feels unbearable, not because the financial loss is catastrophic, but because the emotional foundation is external. When the market moves against you, it is not just your portfolio that is threatened, it is your entire sense of order. And because you have not developed the internal capacity to self-regulate, you either freeze or you reach for rescue. You look for someone to tell you what to do. You look for a narrative that makes sense of the chaos. You look for anything that will restore the feeling of being held. Buffett does not offer that holding. He offers something harder and more valuable. He offers a model of internal stability that does not depend on external conditions. He shows you what it looks like to remain coherent when everyone around you is panicking, to make decisions from principles rather than from fear, to accept uncertainty as a permanent condition rather than an emergency that must be resolved. And he shows you that this is possible, not because he is special, but because he committed to it. The projection mechanism is central here. Projection is the unconscious process by which you attribute your own disowned qualities to someone else. When you idealize a financial figure, you are often projecting your own latent capacity for clarity, discipline, and independent thought onto them. You see in them what you cannot yet see in yourself. And this is not inherently problematic. Projection is part of how we learn. We see a quality externalized before we can internalize it. But the process breaks down when projection becomes permanent, when you never move from admiration to integration, when you remain forever the student and never become the practitioner. Buffett is not withholding the secret. There is no secret. The strategy is public. The principles are documented. The interviews are available. What is missing is not information. What is missing is your willingness to stop projecting your competence onto him and start embodying it yourself. And that shift requires something far more difficult than learning a new investment technique. It requires grieving the fantasy of rescue. It requires accepting that you are alone with your choices. And it requires building a relationship with uncertainty that does not depend on someone else resolving it for you. This is where the relational cost becomes visible. People who remain psychologically dependent on external financial authority often describe their intimate relationships as similarly structured. They seek partners who will make decisions for them, who will provide certainty, who will take responsibility for outcomes. And when those partners fail to do so, or when they do so inconsistently, the relationship becomes a site of chronic anxiety. Because the unmet need is not actually for a competent partner. The unmet need is for a parent who will finally show up and make the world safe. But no partner can do that. No guru can do that. No strategy can do that. The only person who can make you feel safe is you. And the only way to do that is to repeatedly prove to yourself that you can make decisions, tolerate the consequences, and remain intact. This is not a one-time event. This is a practice, and it is the practice Buffett has been modeling for 70 years. The fear of abandonment and the fear of intimacy are often understood as opposites, but they are two sides of the same wound. The fear of abandonment says, if I am fully myself, I will be rejected. The fear of intimacy says, if I let someone see me fully, I will be consumed. Both fears are rooted in the belief that your authentic self is unacceptable. And both fears lead to the same outcome. You do not show up. You perform. You wait. You defer. You protect yourself from being seen by never fully arriving. In financial terms, this manifests as perpetual learning without application. You absorb information. You understand concepts. You can discuss strategy fluently, but you do not commit. You do not build a position and hold it through discomfort. You do not make a decision that exposes you to judgment, because exposure feels like annihilation. And so you remain hidden, you remain safe, and you remain stuck. Buffett's public visibility is not accidental. He does not hide his positions. He does not obscure his reasoning. He publishes his thinking annually and allows the world to judge him. This is not arrogance. This is integration. He has accepted that he will be wrong sometimes, that people will criticize him, that his reputation will fluctuate, and he has decided that this is preferable to hiding, because hiding is a form of self-abandonment. It is the choice to prioritize safety over selfhood, and that choice has a cost that accumulates silently over decades. The emotional consequence of remaining unconscious to this pattern is not dramatic. It is not a single catastrophic event. It is the slow erosion of agency. It is the quiet accumulation of regret. It is the feeling at 50 or 60 or 70 that you spent your life waiting for permission that was never going to come, that you deferred to voices that were no more certain than your own, that you sacrificed decades of compound growth, not just financial but psychological, because you could not tolerate the discomfort of being responsible for yourself. Integration is not about becoming fearless. It is about changing your relationship to fear. It is about recognizing that the discomfort of uncertainty is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that you are doing something real,
that you are no longer performing the persona of the perpetual student, that you are making choices that matter, and that those choices will sometimes be wrong, and that this is not a failure of character, it is the cost of participation.
Buffett's philosophy is not a set of stock picks. It is a psychological framework for navigating uncertainty without collapsing into dependence. It is a model of what it looks like to trust yourself enough to act, to observe the results without defensiveness, and to refine your understanding over time. It is a demonstration that you do not need to be saved, that no one is coming, and that this is not a tragedy. It is an invitation. The integration process begins with recognition, not the recognition of external patterns, but the recognition of your own participation in them. The recognition that you have been waiting, that you have been deferring, that you have been outsourcing your authority to people who cannot carry it for you, and that this has been a choice, not a conscious choice, not a malicious choice, but a choice nonetheless. And if it has been a choice, it can be reevaluated. You do not need to become Warren Buffett. You do not need to replicate his life or his returns. What you need is to stop using him as a projection screen and start using him as a mirror. To see in his discipline the possibility of your own discipline. To see in his self-reliance the invitation to your own self-reliance. To see in his willingness to be publicly wrong the permission to stop hiding. And to understand that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is not a gap in knowledge, it is a gap in emotional ownership. No one is coming to save you. Not because you are unworthy of saving, but because salvation is not something that can be given, it is something that must be claimed. And the claiming begins the moment you stop waiting for someone else to tell you that you are ready. You are ready now. You have always been ready, and the only thing standing between you and the life you want is your willingness to stop asking permission and start making decisions. This is not motivational rhetoric. This is psychological reality, and it is available to you the moment you decide it is. If this resonated with you, if you felt something shift as you listened, I'd appreciate it if you'd take a moment to like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this, deep psychologically grounded explorations of the patterns that shape our financial and emotional lives. Share this with someone who might need to hear it, and turn on the notification bell so you're notified when we post another video like this. Because this work matters, and you matter, and no one is coming to do this for you.